Hello and welcome to our discussion today. We want to quickly look at training design, which is our fourth in this discussion. And our objectives are to explain the factors that affect training design, to discuss the need for budgeting when it comes to training, to recognize the design theory, and then describe the outcomes of training design. So these will be our focus in the discussion today. So um, for our introduction, we'll say that in designing training programs, and for that matter, successful training programs, they require not only a thorough understanding of the problem or of the training problem, but also a well-stated definition of the results to be achieved and a thought-out plan for achieving those results. So in the last discussion we had, we looked at the needs analysis where you identify why a particular training is needed for some group of employees in an organization, right? Once you have identified the gap or you have identified the training need, that is not enough, all right? Identifying the training need is excellent, but you also need to be able to outline the results that you expect. So you have identified training needs. You also need to be able to identify the results you expect and how you'll be able to achieve those results. Okay. So that is why planning or the training design is very important. The design is a planning activity, which in the context of training refers to the framework that helps you to analyze the training problem, define the intended outcome, and determine how to present the content to the learners so that those outcomes will be achieved. All right. Also, it helps to be able to develop the training course according to the design, implement the course, evaluate its effectiveness, and then you devise follow-up activities. Okay, so the design helps you from the training needs analysis to the end of the activity where you get to evaluate how effective a particular training has been. Okay, so there are several components of an effective training program. And last week we looked at the first one, which is the training needs assessment or the training needs analysis. And we say that it doesn't end there. Okay, that is just one component of the training program. So in designing, being able to identify the need or the gap is just one component of an effective training program. So the other components are the training objectives, the course planning and preparation, the course content, the course design, your teaching aids or audiovisual aids. Then you have your teaching methods, your team, okay, the team building, the organizational climate, how you monitor and evaluate after the training has been implemented, as well as follow-up of training programs. So these are the various elements of an effective training program. And during the design process, all of these components will have to be analyzed. Okay. So what are some of the considerations in designing effective training programs, right? And one of the very important considerations when you are designing an effective training program is the organizational climate for the training. You need to have an environment or a climate that is suitable for the training. What this means is that no matter how well designed you have put together a particular training, it may not yield the necessary results if the organizational climate is not suitable. Okay, so according to Sharma, he defines organizational climate as the pattern of social interaction that characterizes an organization. So the way the organization interacts among itself, the way employees interact among themselves, the way management interacts with subordinates, subordinates with superiors, that pattern is what you refer to as the organizational climate. And the main units of interaction in their concept of climate are individual, the group, and the leader. Okay, so you have the individual, group, and leader as the main concepts of the climate of every organization. Then, according to Parikh, he defined organizational climate, or he also refers to the organizational climate as the motivational climate of an organization. And he defines it as the climate as perceived by the people working therein. So how the employees perceive the climate is what you call the organizational climate, right? And there are several dimensions of the organizational climate. You have decision making, loyalty, job description, the work atmosphere, okay, permissiveness, how complaints are handled in the organization, job charity, favoritism, feedback, open-mindedness, emotional control, future orientation. You have scientific and technical orientation, intellectual orientation, the job challenge, task orientation, industriousness, altruism, sociability, interpersonal aggressions, rules orientation, administrative efficiency, conventionality, and then readiness to innovate. There are a lot of dimensions. These are just a few that are numbered here. But what you will notice is that for every organization, the climate may not be the same. Okay, every organization has its own climate depending on how the employees perceive the climate. Okay, and all of these dimensions help to define how the organizational climate will be. So now we look at some advantages of designing a training and development program. You realize that based on the organizational climate, the way a training program is designed will differ from one organization to the other. But in all circumstances, there needs to be a design. Okay, so we look at the advantages of designing training and development programs. The first one is to effectively achieve the goals and objectives of the training and development program. Remember that if you want to achieve a goal, right, and you don't put together a plan, it is difficult to know if the objective you set out to achieve has even been achieved, right? So as you design the training program, it helps you to achieve the objectives that you set out for the training. It also helps to pave the way for systematic learning experiences to the trainees to improve their job performance, right? So once you design the training, it sets out a systematic learning experience. So the trainees are able to follow a particular order, or they're able to follow a particular plan to ensure that their learning experiences are a good one, okay? Or it paves the way for a systematic learning experience. It's not like everything is just happening at once. Everything is just put together and everyone is all over the place, okay? The third advantage is it helps to imbibe a culture of continuous learning and development among the trainees, all right? When you design the training program and it is documented, it helps the members of the organization or employees or trainees to imbibe a culture of continuous learning and development. It also helps to deliver value for money to the trainees as well as organizations. Once you're able to design the training program and you design it well, the trainers or whoever would implement the design you have set out will even though they'll be paid for what they are giving out, you ensure you realize that there will be a value for money. What you have given out is what the value you expect is what you will get, because you have a fair idea, or you have a well documented idea of what you want to get. Okay, so the outcome is clearly stated. And so for whoever gets the contract to deliver the training, you have something by which you will measure the work that they have done. Okay. The fifth advantage is to enable employees to attain abilities in order to perform adequately. If you design a training program very well, you are able to tailor each training for the needed participants in a way that helps them to attain their abilities so that they can perform well on the job. Number 6, it helps to deliver a platform for knowledge, skills, and attitudes in an activity. Okay. You design program, you help people to develop specific skills, knowledge, and attitudes in that activity. The seventh advantage is that it helps to prepare existing employees for higher level jobs. You realize that for every organization, with time, there are changes and people get to be promoted. So one of the ways you are able to prepare employees when there is a change or when there is any kind of development in the operations of the organizations, how you are able to prepare them for that role in the future is when you are able to put together a well-designed training and development program, right? It also makes employees mobile and versatile, because as you design training for employees, you equip them with different skills and with different knowledge that helps them to be able to fit into various roles when the need arises. Okay. So these employees can change jobs quickly, they can perk up their functioning levels and achieve career goals comfortably because there's a designed training and development program that they are going through. Okay, and they can be placed on various jobs depending on organizational needs. It also helps to bridge the gap between what the employee has and what the job demands, as well as to make employees more useful in the long run. Okay. And then number 10, it helps to eliminate incorrect working procedures and produce working habits that will ensure that the best methods are taught. Okay, because you have a well-designed training programs, you notice that only the best methods are taught for every training. I think in our very first discussion, we said that one of the main reasons why people do not train their employees is because it can be very expensive, right? Training can be very expensive depending on how it is designed. So there is the need to focus on budgeting when it comes to training, right? So there's the budget allocation, then there's the budgeting process. And then you also need to be able to justify the reason for which you require a particular investment. Okay, so there needs to be a justification for why a particular training is important. Okay, and then there are also different types of costs that are involved. You need to know these. So for us, we will not really go into the nitty-gritty of the budgeting. What we have to do is how the allocation is done. And for HR people, there are two methods of allocating the budget for training and development activities. Okay, so the first method is where all costs on the training and development activities are observed by the human resource department. Okay, and everything is recorded at one place in the corporate office. So what this means is that the budget is centralized and it just has to the central office or the corporate office puts together the whatever they need. Okay, so everything comes from the central office. What this means is that the HR department is not really in charge of the budgeting. They would come up with everything they need, okay, and then so the first one says that all costs on the HR development and training activities, right, are observed by the HR department and recorded at one place, okay, in the corporate office. So it means that for this one, the budget allocation and everything is handled by the HR department. So they determine how much they will need, how much they will use, and then they plan for training with it. And then the second method requires that the central office, okay, puts together the training, the budget allocation for the HR departments and gives out to them as and when necessary. Okay, so the HR department, they control their spending of the funds for training. So in one context, the controlling of the funds for training is done by the corporate office, right? And then for the other one, the training is done by, sorry, the budget allocation is done by the HR department. Okay, so there are two forms of budget allocation. The first one has a centralized system where everything comes from the corporate office. So it has just one source, and then it is given out to the HR department as and when they need it. And then for the second one, the HR department determine what kind of training they have to do, and they are in charge, or they control the costs that are assigned to development and training programs in the department. Okay, so get the difference. Well, one has the control by the HR department themselves. They control the funds or budget allocation. And then for the other one, the budget allocation is done by the corporate office. Okay. So there are different methods of instruction, and we'll be looking at the various methods of instruction. So as you design, you need to know all of these methods of instructions, and it will help you to come up with a good design for your employees. If you know the alternatives, then you can design a good training program for your employees. The first one we look at is the seminar, right? The seminars are a popular choice for large-scale training issues like professional standards updates and customer service issues. So we all know what a seminar is. You put people together, get experts to speak to them on a particular issue, right? So the benefits of this type of training is how it is done, because you have an expert that comes around, and that expert speaks to the employees in an area that they need knowledge in. Okay, and these experts cover all the issues that are related to a particular eh, all the issues related to a particular gap that has been identified. Okay, and this is done in a short period of time. That seminars most of the times do not go past some hours in a day. Okay, so for the seminars, you have training materials which are provided, and then employees enjoy the fact that they get to work out, or they get out of work to attend the seminar. Okay, depending on where, or depending on the location of the seminar, you realize that employees may have to go out, and that sometimes comes in as something that is out of the ordinary for employees, and so they get to enjoy that aspect of it. There are, however, some disadvantages when it comes to seminars. Seminars are based on the time and money that they require. Okay, so employees are most of the times away from their job for 1 or more days to attend the seminar. So sometimes the company has to do without their services. So if the employee is such that he's the only one on the job at a particular time, if that guy goes for training, then it means the job will not be done until they come. Okay, so the company must either do without their services during this time or pay for a temporary replacement until the employee comes back. In addition to losing money for the missed work, the company also has to pay for the seminar, the travel, the lodging, and meals while the employee is at the seminar. Okay, so sometimes this can be very costly for employers. Another disadvantage is the type of training. Okay, and sometimes you realize that the material is given out to employees at the same pace and in the same manner. But you and I know that people do not learn at the same pace and in the same way. So if you are giving out materials at the same pace and in the same manner, it means that some people will benefit from the training program and others will not benefit from it. Okay, so that is it for the seminars. Another training method is what you call the programmed instruction. And it's basically a hard copy format of training that is delivered through a step-by-step booklet, a latent ink booklet, or through computer-assisted instruction or computer-based training. Okay, so the programmed instruction kind of training, it helps you to know how to do something. So it's a step-by-step guide on how to perform a particular task. Okay, and all of these formats allow the employees to progress at their own pace and to go back over material as many times as needed. So unlike the seminar where everybody is given the same material at the same time and at the same pace, the programmed instruction is such that the employees or the trainees get to access the material at their own pace, and they can go back to the material to refer as and when it is needed, as many times as they have to. Okay. However, the disadvantage of this type of training is the cost associated with purchasing the training materials for every employee. Okay, because people have to learn at their own pace. You cannot say you are getting only one material for everybody. It means everyone needs a copy of the material. If it is a booklet, if it's a printout, or if it is a document, everybody needs a copy. Okay. And sometimes if your organization is such that there's a high turnover rate, it means that as you give the materials out to the employees or to the trainees, it's only a matter of time and they will leave. You have to get another one for the new employees who would come in. So sometimes the programmed instruction is a bit expensive. Then you can have another training method, right? Which is called the case studies. So examining of case studies. All right. And this one is where you have a particular case and people get to draw lessons from the case. Okay. So the advantages of this type of training is that most of the times the issues that are addressed in the various cases that are studied are specific to that organization. And so the employees can see a connection, or they're able to see a link between a skill and its results easier. Okay. In that case, that will be analyzed rather than if it was just a general thing. Okay, so what this happens is that employees can see the connection between the skill and its results. Okay, and in this situation, then they can, if they are just given a booklet to go and learn, like we saw earlier, right? Like in the programmed instruction. This one, requires that they sit down and analyze a particular case. So as they go through the case, they are able to situate themselves somewhere in the case, and then they know how to handle issues. The disadvantage of this methodology is that sometimes, depending on which case is used, employees feel that they are singled out. So if a particular case is talking about an employee or is addressing an issue that is directly related to what an employee is doing, it makes them feel like the discussion is about them. And sometimes it may make people, or it may make employees feel bad. So in order to overcome this, um, there is the need to put the case study in such a way that it does not mention any employee's name. Okay, it gives that the employees anonymity, and that the changes that are recognized can also not be the changes that are seen in that case cannot be connected to any individual. Okay, it should not be attributed to any specific individual in the organization, so that people will not feel bad during the training. There's also simulation, right? And simulation is basically walking an employee through the motions of a skill in a controlled environment until they master the skill. Okay, and the benefits of this training methodology is that they help to train employees to perform specific skills needed for their job. Okay, and the simulations help to train employees to respond appropriately to unexpected events in a controlled environment. All right, so for example, if you are teaching people how to, or if you are training employees on how to fight fire, you can simulate an event, okay, like that, and then as the employees go through the motions, they learn how to fight fire. Okay, the drawbacks of this is that there's the need for more money. So if the organization has financial constraints, then it is difficult to use simulation as a method of instruction. And in some cases where the simulation requires equipment, it requires machines, then the cost can be extraordinarily high. Okay, so simulation exercises that use some devices and machines that are very expensive are limited to larger businesses or companies that are located close to companies that lend out the simulators. So an organization, depending on its size, if it cannot afford for if it cannot afford an equipment or a machine or a tool for simulation, it can rent the simulator from another organization for the training. Okay, otherwise, for most of the small organizations, they would not go for simulation as a method of instruction. Then we also have role playing. And role playing is one of the inexpensive training methods that most organizations use. And what happens here is that employees act out scenes from their job, okay, in which they face challenges and situations that they normally will come across during the average day. All right. So what you do is you allow employees to play certain roles in the organization, right? So maybe you want someone to one day become the head of department. You can allow them to play the role or to act in that office for some time, and then they get to learn. Okay. So the benefits of this type of training are that it is inexpensive and that it covers the skills that are specific to the job in question. There are, however, some disadvantages, and the disadvantages are that some employees may not feel comfortable in the situation, and therefore they may not learn well under the pressure that you expose them to. Okay, some people are not they do not adapt easily to change. So once they are playing the role and they encounter some challenges, they are not able to cope. Then we also have the apprentice training, right? And this is one category of trainings that most organizations use to train their employees. And is used for training employees in trade and craft industries. So you realize that people go and understudy an experienced professional, okay, or an experienced tradesperson, and they get to learn from them. Most of the times they stay there for years until they have accumulated some experience. However, this can be used for office situations as well. So we do not limit the apprentice training to just the craft industries and trade, right? It can be applied to the office situations as well. The benefits are that it helps to give new employees a role model for proper work behavior and functioning, and it provides new employees with personal support during their training. So you realize that there's someone there you can always go and ask questions from. There's someone there who always attend to the doubts that you have about the skills that you're picking up. The disadvantage that it hinders the ability of the experienced employee to do their work. Okay, sometimes in training other people, it slows down the pace at which the master or the lead is supposed to work. It reduces their productivity. And sometimes the personality types of the trainee and the trainer may not really be compatible. There may be conflicts in their personality types. And sometimes, based on this, it will affect the results of the training. At the end of the day, the objective for which you organize the training may not be achieved because the apprentice and his master or her master were having conflicts. Okay. And then finally, the overall productivity of the company is hindered during the training process in a case where there are conflicts and these conflicts are not resolved well. Okay, so then it takes us to the outcome of the design. So once you are done with the design, there are things that you should have done. Okay, you should have been able to come up with a design for on-the-job training. All right, if it's an off-the-job training, you should be able to come up with a design for off-the-job training, how it's going to be, and then you should also be able to design a material for the training as well as the type of training approach to use. So in a particular design, if you have designed a training program, these are the various designs that you should have had. You should have designed the material, the training approach, whether it's going to be on the job training or off the job training. Okay. All right. So if we look at the operational design for on-the-job training, there are a few things that you have to do. The first one is to list the agreed objectives for the training program. Like we have said, the first thing is to know the objectives for which you are organizing the training. Okay, so you list your objectives, and this serves as your plan or your blueprint for the training. Okay, you also need to consider the learning population or the employees and how they will affect the program design. So you should know the number of people trained for that particular period, right? How long they will be training for, okay, what kind of people they are, the level of employees you are going to train. So you need to know the learning population and how they will affect the design. You also need to know how many people the program will cover. Okay, so you have to know the number of people so that in selecting a venue, you don't get a venue that is too small or too big for the training. You also need to know the age range of the learners because the way young people are able to pick things up is different from how old people are able to learn. So you need to know the age range of the learners. You need to know the experiences they have. okay, so that the training can be tailored for them well. You should also know the learning preferences for your trainees. Okay, how do they want to be trained? Based on the alternatives that are available to you, which of the training modes will best work for the employees, or will be the best option for the employees. So get to know their learning preferences. You also need to know the level of knowledge of the learners, so that it's not like you are repeating what they already know as employees. You need to be able to fill a gap, right? That is why you need to know the level of knowledge of the learners. You also need to know the location of the potential learners, right? So that if you have to move to another location, the distance they will cover before they get there will be taken care of. All right. You also need to list the ways in which each objective might best be met. All right. So depending on the number of objectives you have, you need to check with how each of the objectives will be met. And then you need to decide whether the learning will be best achieved by an on-the-job or off-the-job training form. Okay. So once you decide that, then the operational design is done. Then we look at the material design. For the material design, it decides on the nature of the training approaches. Okay, so you need to know if it's one-on-one you are doing, if you are coaching, if it's project management, if you are mentoring, or it's open decrying where you have open source documents. You just give a link and the people go to study. Okay, you need to decide on the nature of the training approach. Then you also have to plan the order of events to meet the programmer and the individual's objective. Okay, you need to plan how will things go on day one, what will happen, day two, what will happen, or you can use time. So for the first 2 hours and that, and that, and that. Okay. Then, based on the order of events, you prepare an outline, okay, for the program, detailed from the various items or from the order of events that you have planned. You need to prepare an outline. Then you discuss the proposed outline, discuss the proposed plan with the people who will be involved in, and if possible, the learning population and their line managers. This is very important because you would not want that on the day of the training, you are told that the employee is busy. So you need to talk to their managers, you need to talk to the employee themselves, so that they all get to be familiar with the proposed plan. And then finally, you complete the agreed program plan after engaging with all the stakeholders. Right. So the various types of training approach, like I said, you can have on-the-job training or off-the-job training. And the first and probably the most important decision concerns the type of training approach. So you need to do this as early as possible, because this is needed to satisfy the agreed objectives for a particular group of learners. So you need to know whether the program you want to have or the training you want to give the employees should be on the job training or off the job training, right? For on the job training, it means that the people are still working, and then whilst they are working, you give them training. And then for the off the job training, the employees get to leave a particular work environment for some time, and that time is when they are able to use to complete the training. And then once they are done with the training, they come back to the job. Okay, so in designing for off-the-job training, you need to consider the number of people that have to be covered by the program. You also need to know the age range of the learning groups, right? You need to list the agreed objectives for the training program. You also have to consider the learning population and how they will affect the program design. Okay, you need to decide whether the learning will be best achieved by an on-the-job or off-the-job program form. Then you consider the possible accommodation and how it will affect the course design and practice. You will notice that the operational design for off-the-job training is almost the same as the operational design for on-the-job training. There are, however, some differences, and the difference here has to do with accommodating the employees. Okay, so for the off-the-job training, you need to consider the possible accommodation of the employees and how it will affect the course design and practice. You also have to confirm whether you are restricted to a certain period of time or whether the program will be allowed the full time required for effective completion. You also have to confirm from the you also have to confirm the start and finish of the program, okay? And then you would need to consider the material design, the learning styles, and then the location of the learning groups. All of these will affect your design, all right? But you will notice that the operational design for off-the-job training is almost the same as on-the-job training. The only difference has to do with the fact that because the employees are moving away from the work environment, you have to consider issues related to accommodation, transportation, and how the course will be designed and delivered. So that brings us to the end of our discussion today, all right? But for our activity, I want you to put together a design, a training design for front desk executives, right? So you would conduct a needs analysis. You just in your write-up tell us what you would do to be able to come up with a gap. Okay, so you are supposed to identify a gap for the particular training, and then you design a training for front desk executives, okay, or receptionist, as you will call it. So you have to design a training program for a front desk executives. For a front desk executive. Details of this will be shared with you on the page. All right. Thank you, and I'll see you soon.